Welcome to the Frontier Leader Show. Today, Martin is flying solo.
Hello and welcome to the Frontier Leader Show. I'm Martin Wheatley, and most weeks I speak to leaders, coaches, practitioners and technologists working out what good leadership looks like in an AI-shaped world. But this week I'm on my own, and we are going to cover off some topics that have been hitting the media throughout July, just to bring leaders up to date. Now we are into the month of August. So while you still have the app open, please hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. And if you like the sound of this episode, then you will love some of the content that I have on the AIleaderlab.com, and the link will be in the show notes. So July has been a very, very busy month in the world of AI. And it kicked off at the beginning of the month with the US government granting Anthropic the final go-ahead to re-release Fable 5 to the masses. And this was previously shut down 2.5 weeks prior, in the middle of June, due to security concerns around what the model was capable of. But the US government reviewed it and they managed to release it on the beginning of July. And then shortly after, ChatGPT released their new 5.6 models, Sol, Terra and Luna, having gone through a similar kind of US government sign-off, taking a week or so. So that released into the wild. And it does now raise the question to leaders that are building their businesses and having their teams work with the frontier models about what happens if a model is suddenly pulled from service or restricted to US citizens only, which is what was being mooted at one point with the Anthropic piece. At the same time, throughout the month, there has been Palantir CEO Alex Karp and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella both saying roughly the same thing about using these frontier models through the likes of OpenAI, Anthropic, that businesses are giving away their IP to these closed model providers. Satya Nadella coined the term reverse information paradox, and it's all around that not only is it costing firms money via way of tokens to the frontier labs, but it's also leaking operational know-how and their IP back to the vendor with every prompt and every correction. And there's a real sense of, how these two companies are challenging the way in which the frontier labs really work. Now, it is worth pointing out that Microsoft has a vested interest in the success of Anthropic and OpenAI, having been one of the major investors in OpenAI many years ago, but they're also developing their own models. And through Microsoft Azure Foundry, you can have access to a lot of different models in the background. So they're also doing the platform play. But it is interesting now to see that the person or the company that was invested in these frontier models is also cautioning the use of them. But from a leader's perspective, from a business perspective, what are the alternatives? What is the option if you don't want to use a frontier lab like OpenAI, like Anthropic, like Google with Gemini? What are the alternatives? And the other kind of key thread that's run throughout this month is all around open-weighted models. And I just want to pause for a second and just explain what this terminology is. So let's just start with closed-weighted, because that is what 99.9% of the world will be using at the minute. It'll be closed-weighted models. And these are the ones that the frontier labs are pushing out from Anthropic, with Fable, with Sonnet, OpenAI with the new Sol, Terra and Luna, and Google with Gemini. They're all closed weight. And if you think of it like leasing a car, you get to use the car, but the bonnet is welded shut. You don't get access to the engine. All you can literally do is drive exactly what has been given to you. That is a closed-weighted model. Open-weighted models is basically where you get chance to own the car. You can get to the engine. You can see and make changes to certain things. You can add a spoiler to the back. You can put a sports exhaust on, but you still don't know how the engine was made in the first place. So this is where you can download a model onto your hardware and essentially run it locally in your infrastructure. Now, some of the models are very large. You need a large amount of compute power available, but some can run on a laptop. But again, it's scalability. But that is open-weighted. You get access to the model, but you don't see how it's been built in the background. Open sourced is you get everything. You get the car, you get the engine, you get the full factory instructions for how you would rebuild that exact same car in future if you were to write it off. So there's these different layers of model. Open sourced being every single thing. And this is going to be many, many, many gigabytes, petabytes of data that went into training the model, how it got built, and understanding the weights and how it was configured in the background. Open weighted is a halfway house where you can download it and run it locally, but you can't rebuild it from scratch, but you can tweak it significantly. And closed weight is what you will get with Anthropic and OpenAI, where it's on a SaaS type basis. You rent or lease the usage of their models through either a subscription or a token base. Now, OpenWeight has had its biggest month so far. There has been major releases coming out of China. Moonshot AI released Kimi K3, which is a 2.8 trillion parameter open-weight model. It's the largest open source release to date. And we've had GPU's, if that's how you pronounce it, GLM 5.2 has also come out. And, these models that have been released, a lot of people think, they are Chinese models, you don't want to touch them. And yes, if you use their models based on a closed weighted basis, so you are sending information to them, then absolutely, that information is going through to China. Whatever you type is going through to China. But if you download that model onto your infrastructure, it is all contained locally. It does not go anywhere outside of your company, your laptop, wherever you put these models. Now, Kimi K3 will never fit on a laptop. You will need serious processing power for this. But China is very much leading the way at the minute in terms of building these open weight models that companies and individuals can use. And it used to be that these models were a year behind the frontier releases. So what OpenAI, ChatGPT were bringing out versus what China and the open models were replicating, it used to be that there was a year time lag behind that. Now, with all the movement in July, that seemed to have dropped. Some people are saying it's within 2 or 3 months. The UK's own AI Security Institute measured the cyber capability gap specifically at 4 to 7 months, and this was on cyber-related tasks that these models were asked to complete in relation to security activity. But 4 to 7 months, and that's down from 6 to 10 months just a year ago. And what is being shown is that these models are getting better and better and better at a pace relative, or if not faster, than the frontier models. Now, there has been some controversy. Anthropic has come out and said that some of the Chinese labs have basically done distillation attacks on their model in order to train the Chinese models faster and cheaper. And a distillation attack, or what they're alleging, is that the Chinese models had thousands of Anthropic subscription user accounts and then essentially prompted the model thousands and thousands and thousands of times to then essentially reverse engineer it into what has now been created with the open source model. So they've essentially reverse engineered Anthropic's frontier model, paying a subscription for it, but then re-engineering it in the back and then releasing an open source model on the back. And if you look at some of the comparisons between what Fable 5 outputs versus what Kimi K3 outputs, for argument's sake, they're very, very similar. So you can see where they're coming from. Obviously, Anthropic are suitably annoyed at this, but at the same time, the Chinese labs have paid subscriptions, that they've funded Anthropic's revenue figures by doing this, and arguably their whole case is that, well, Anthropic and OpenAI and all the leading frontier models copied somebody else. So copied the source, if you like, from books and newspapers and articles that were already online. So, there's this whole debate about whether that should and shouldn't be allowed, but it has happened according to some people. But all this proves is, the models, open-weighted models, are an option for companies. On the 24th of July, a coalition of the leading AI companies came together and published a letter basically opposing regulating the open weight models the same way as the closed weight models have done. So i.e. not having to go through the similar kind of rigmaroles that Anthropic and OpenAI have had to go through. However, Anthropic were not one of the ones to sign this. They did come out afterwards and say, no, we have never called for a blanket ban on open models, but obviously their business case and their business model is for people to pay for subscriptions and tokens to Anthropic. So why would they want to champion an open model? But this narrative around open-weighted models being available to businesses is true. Now, companies can use and can implement an open-weighted model. There is nothing to stop them going on to sites such as Hugging Face and downloading some of these open-weight models. However, they come with significant challenges. You need somebody to administer it. You need somebody to make sure it's installed properly, to be on support if it goes down. It isn't going to be as easy as having a link or having an outsourced or a SaaS agreement, if you like, with the frontier models, because you need to build that capability in-house. You need to build the support mechanism around it and the infrastructure, and that will come with its own cost. But there will be a tipping point. Obviously, with each company, it's going to be different, but there will be a tipping point between how much the subscription costs or token usage costs to the frontier models versus how much the support, infrastructure, and maintenance of an open-weighted in-house model will cost. And, so it is a real option. However, I think a lot of the larger firms, certainly some of the people I'm speaking to at the minute, they're not interested in going down the open-weighted route. They would much rather look at companies that have the expertise, such as OpenAI, such as Google, such as Anthropic, or indeed through Microsoft, where you've got access to other models under the hood in Azure Foundry that you can build out on your own. So I don't think yet we've reached the tipping point with people seriously building open weight models in-house yet. However, I think in a couple of years time, when the technology gets easier to host, the models get smaller in terms of memory size and memory usage, or memory capacity, should I say, that's needed, I think it might change. But for now, the question certainly has to be, if a frontier model does suddenly disappear after you've been using it, what's the backup? It's not going to be an easy answer, but do you always need the frontier model? It comes back to the cost piece that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago around, don't always use the frontier models for everything. Use the cheaper, less token hungry models to actually complete the work, and that way you might not be caught out when models suddenly appear, then disappear, or if the US government decide to suddenly withhold a model to anybody outside of the USA. So, look, open weight is definitely good. It's pushing people and, to develop new technologies, but it's got a long way to go, in my opinion, before it becomes a reasonable alternative for many, many companies out there. So look, that was just a short one today, just to give a bit of an overview of what's happened in the open source, open weight versus closed weight environment. It's a lot of terminology that some people won't have heard, or they've heard and misunderstood. But, it's important that leaders implementing AI into their business understand this terminology to a certain extent, so that they know the best decisions to be made, and so that they don't get unnecessarily caught out by people promising the world and not being able to deliver. But look, I hope you found that useful. If you have, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss next week's episode, which will be a return to the interview style format. There's a growing number of resources available at the AILeaderLab.com, so please make sure to go and check that out. Until next time, bye-bye for now.